Early in the 1970s, Anheuser-Busch set their sights on Williamsburg, Virginia. They would build a brewery, Kings Mill Resort, and a new theme park called Busch Gardens, the Old Country. Over the last 48 years, this has evolved into the most beautiful park in the country, and it has one of the best coaster collections. Since 1975, Busch Gardens has seen 15 coasters come and go, and there's even one on the way. Today, let's look at every coaster in their history and rank them up from worst to best. My first trip to Busch Gardens Williamsburg was back in 2008, and I came back in 2019 and 2022. As you will see, a lot of these coasters closed before I could get there, but I have ridden some of them after they've been relocated to other parks, or I've ridden their clones. For those I didn't ride and has a custom layout, I did my best to rank them up. Number 16, Das Katchen, an Alan Herschel Little Dipper, opened in 1976, closed in 1984. 1 year after the park opened, the Oktoberfest section made its debut, and Das Katchen, or the Kitten, was one of the 2 coasters opening in the area. These Little Dippers were very popular coasters for kids. 162 were built between the 1940s and 1990s. These are very short oval models, very small dips, and this served 9 seasons at the park. As far as I could tell, it was never relocated. Number 15, Grover's Alpine Express, a Zero Force family coaster, opened in 2009. When Busch Gardens opened their brand new Sesame Street Forest of Fun, it featured this Zero coaster. It heads up its booster wheel lift, all the way up to the 24-foot peak, but it only has 600 feet of track, pretty much covering 2 very large turns. It's more complex than the Alan Herschel Little Dipper, but it's still a very basic family coaster. Number 14, Wild Mouse, a Mack Rides Wild Mouse, opened in 1996, closed in 2003. This opened the same year Atlanta hosted the Summer Olympics, and their mascot was Izzy, this blue thing. And for its opening year, the ride was actually called Izzy. But once the Olympics were over, it was renamed to Wild Mouse, using the German spelling as this was part of Oktoberfest. This is your typical Mack Mouse, the compact mobile version. This one doesn't have a big drop off the lift. It just has the switchbacks, followed by the dips and turns, and it's a very mild, family-friendly ride. After the 2003 season, this was packed up and shipped south, reopening at Busch Gardens Tampa as Cheetah Chase, later renamed as Sand Serpent when the park opened Cheetah Hunt. This is where I rode it, and it's nothing special. Wild Mouse was replaced by the Curse of Dark Castle, now the home of Dark Coaster. Number 13, Glissade, a Schwarzkopf jumbo jet, opened in 1975, closed in 1985. Before Wild Mouse was built on this spot in Oktoberfest, there was Glissade. These jumbo jet models were everywhere in the 70s and 80s, and they were built to be portable. It starts with a spiral lift, and then dives down into a series of intense and low-to-the-ground turns. I say, it's kind of like a bird swooping down for its prey and then peeling out of there. I never rode this, not even when it was relocated to Mexico, spending time at 2 different parks down there until finally being removed in 2019. I have ridden Jetstar 2 at Lagoon, which is a different model but looks very similar, and I love how intense it is, especially in the front row. It's good, janky fun. Number 12, Drachenfire, an aero looper, opened in 1992, closed in 1998. One of the most infamous coasters of all time. This one was also built in Oktoberfest, and apparently, Busch Gardens wanted a B&M looper, but B&M was too busy. This was supposed to be a coaster like Kumba, opening at Busch Gardens Tampa the year after, so they turned to aerodynamics. They seemed to try and build this in the image of a B&M, and it didn't work. It started with a wraparound corkscrew, an inversion 145 feet off the ground, serving as the first drop. This is very similar to what Steel Curtain used 27 years later. Covering over 3,500 feet of track, it went through 6 inversions, but in 1994, one of its corkscrews was removed. This ride did have its fans, but in general, it was seen as a rough mess. I never got to ride it, and since this is a custom model, I can't accurately judge it. Because it only lasted about 6.5 seasons, I have to assume it deserves to be outside the top 10. It was closed in 1998 so they could make more modifications. Then they tried to sell it, but nobody wanted it, so in 2002 it was finally torn down. This sat right behind Big Bad Wolf, but its land was never used for anything new. Its station and transfer track building are still standing today, and they can be seen if you ride the train. Number 11, Die Wildkatze, a Schwarzkopf Wildcat, opened in 1976, closed in 1983. When Oktoberfest opened, we talked about their kiddie coaster, Das Katchen, or the Kitten. This was called the Kitten because there was a much bigger coaster opening at the same time, Die Wildkatze, or the Wildcat. Here's another portable Schwarzkopf model, This one's standing 44 feet tall and having over 1,500 feet of track, and it was defined by big drops and turns. Just like Glissade, I never rode this one, and I never rode it at any of its other locations either. This includes Ride Playland in New York, Steel Pier in New Jersey, Williams Grove in Pennsylvania, and finally, where it currently stands, Adventure Park USA in Maryland. You can still ride this piece of history today. This was removed in 1983 to make room for Big Bad Wolf. That station was built on this plot of land. Number 10. Dark Coaster, an Intamin family launch coaster, opening in 2023. I am obviously projecting here. This is brand new this year and I have not ridden it. We know it's indoors, we know it has 4 launches, we know it's family friendly, and we know you're on those jet ski style trains. The SeaWorld chain loves these Intamin launch coasters. There's one at SeaWorld San Antonio, there's a new one coming to San Diego this year, and it sounds like Orlando is getting one next year also. We can assume it'll be kind of like these, but this is throwing in the indoor element. This should be well themed, so even if it's not the most thrilling ride, this might have some awesome effects that could make the ride what it is. Number 9. Tempesto, a premier ride Skyrocket 2, opened in 2015. This was the first of 3 Skyrocket 2s coming to the SeaWorld chain, and unlike the ones that we had seen prior, this had a third car on the train, but it also had comfort collars. This has a swing launch, going forward, backward, and forward again, picking up speed as you go, finally maxing out at 62 miles an hour and rising up to its 150-foot peak, going through a very slow hang-time-filled inline twist, and then doing a vertical twisted dive into a non-inverting loop. It's a short ride at under 1,000 feet, but it has a tiny footprint. I love the SeaWorld Skyrocket 2s despite the comfort collars. You gotta sit in the back car and enjoy all that whip, especially that twisted vertical drop. This packs extreme thrills into a small space. Number 8. Invader, a GCI wooden coaster, opened in 2017. This is not your typical GCI. Those are usually closer to 100 feet and run a little faster than this. Invader is riding the borderline between a thrill coaster and a family coaster. Standing 74 feet tall, maxing out at 48 miles an hour, and covering over 2,100 feet of track. This steel structure wood track coaster packs a punch. When I first rode this in 2019, it was kinda cold and I wasn't all that impressed. I think I needed to let the ride warm up. In 2022, I got a great ride on it. It may not be an airtime machine, but when it's running at full speed, it has those tight elements that give the ride some force. I underestimated this at first. Don't sleep on Invader. Number 7. Loch Ness Monster, an aero looper, opened in 1978. Up to this point in the park's short history, it featured 3 portable clone coasters. Loch Ness Monster put the park on the map, standing 130 feet tall, hitting 60 miles an hour, over 3,200 feet of track, and of course, the signature element, the interlocking loops. This was the first coaster to feature them, and it's the last one remaining. This has a very unique layout for an aero looper, featuring big drops and a helix inside a tunnel, 2 lift hills, and these loops are the only 2 inversions. This is one of my favorite aero coasters, not only because it's unique, but because it's still very smooth. It doesn't just look good, it rides good too. Number 6. Verbolten, a zero launch coaster, opened in 2012. After Big Bad Wolf closed in 2009, the park needed a worthy replacement for this beloved coaster. This is what they came up with. A well-themed, family-friendly launch coaster, and I think they did the Wolf justice. This is themed to a ride on the German Autobahn, the car being struck by lightning and getting lost in the Black Forest. It has a very intense indoor section after the first launch, finishing with a drop track, which is awesome. You free fall 18 feet, and if you're not expecting it, it could be pretty jarring. It has another launch to shoot the train up to its 88-foot peak, diving down the same drop that Big Bad Wolf had, even reusing the same footers. It's a fun and very unique ride. Not extreme by any means, but definitely has its moments. Number 5. Big Bad Wolf, an aero suspended coaster, opened in 1984, closed in 2009. As good as Verbolten is, it doesn't beat its predecessor. Big Bad Wolf is one of those iconic coasters that everyone seems to love, and for good reason. I got to ride this on my first trip to the park back in 2008, and let me just say, it's a shame this one had to go. The park claimed it reached the end of its service life after 25 years. Although, when you look at the other suspended coasters in North America, they're all 30 years or older at this point. This replaced the Schwarzkopf Wildcat, starting off with a 50-foot lift and a twisted run through a village. This was pretty mild, but very well themed. Then it stops, rises up 100 feet, then turns over the river and dives down 80 feet, turning right over the water, those cars swinging out at 48 miles an hour. Then it winds its way back to the station. It wasn't the longest ride at 2,800 feet, but it had those 2 distinct sections and it just had a great layout. In a park loaded with great coasters, this is still top 5. Number 4. Apollo's Chariot, a B&M Hyper, opened in 1999. For the first 8 years of B&M, we saw nothing but looping coasters. In 1999, they turned those loops inside out and made their first hypercoaster, Busch Gardens being the lucky recipients. The brilliant purple and yellow Apollo's Chariot. Located in Festa Italia and going out among the trees, this stands 170 feet tall but drops into a ravine. Its max drop at 210 feet, 73 miles an hour, and almost 4,900 feet of track. This is nothing but hills going out, a big swooping turnaround, and then small hills coming back. The focus on this ride is airtime, and I think it does a great job. This was my first B&M Hyper back in 2008, and for a while, it was my #1 steel coaster. Over my last 2 trips, I can see that this is nowhere near as strong as the newer Hypers. I think B&M made adjustments over the years, and we got much better Hypers now, like Goliath, Diamondback, and Mako. Apollo is still a great ride, but it leaves something to be desired. Number 3. Alpengeist, a B&M invert, opened in 1997. Staying with the German theme, this one not in Oktoberfest, but in Rheinfeld. Alpengeist is themed to the ghost of the Alps, taking control of a ski lift and making it run wild. This is the world's tallest inverted coaster, standing 109 feet and dropping down 170 feet, maxing out at 67 miles an hour, going through 6 inversions. It has a great snow and ice theme, from its trains to the white track, and I seem to enjoy this more every time I ride it. Some people call it rough. I didn't think it was that bad, and I elevated it after my rides in 2019, pushing it up even more after my ride in 2022. It's so intense, it has an interesting layout, it doesn't rattle you around. I think this is the second best invert in America, only trailing its sister coaster in Tampa, Montu. Number 2. Griffin, a B&M dive coaster, opened in 2007. 10 years after Alpengeist opened, it got a new B&M neighbor. Located in France, this was America's second dive coaster, and I think this corrects everything that America's first dive coaster, SheiKra at Busch Gardens Tampa, did wrong. This opened with flowless trains, something that SheiKra would later add on, and this adds a lot to the dive coaster experience. This also has the old-fashioned over-the-shoulder restraints, allowing for some great airtime over that 205-foot vertical drop. It maxes out at 71 miles an hour and covers 3,100 feet of track, 2 inversions, another great drop off the brake run, a splashdown finale, and then an element that nobody talks about but I love, that jarring jolt into the brake run. I couldn't find anything negative to say after my rides in 2022, and I said this has to be the best dive coaster in the country, and in the end, it found its way back into my overall top 50. Number 1. Pantheon, an Intamin launch coaster, opened in 2022. I admit, I was skeptical about this ride. People thought this would top Iron Gwazi. I thought there was no way. After riding Velocicoaster, I was thinking maybe this has a shot. Now, it didn't pass Iron Gwazi, but it surpassed all my expectations. I didn't even think this would be my #1 in the park. After my first ride, I knew that was going to be the case. This is a dynamic ride with 4 launches. It has great hang time, airtime, both floater and ejector, and during that multi-pass launch, that backwards ejector hill might be my favorite part of the ride. It stands 178 feet tall, hits 73 miles an hour, over 3,300 feet of track, 2 inversions. This is just a complete ride. This is located in Festa Italia, just across the path from Apollo's Chariot and Tempesto, and it runs right along the river coming off that massive top hat. Throw in those masterful Intamin trains, the most comfortable lap bars out there, and this is nearly a perfect ride. In a park full of very good coasters, this is their standout. That's a wrap on all the coasters of Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Let me know what you think of the list, where you may agree or disagree, and why. If you've been to this park over the years, what do you think of those 6 defunct coasters? Unlike most of my other parks in this series, only one of their defunct coasters made my top 10, so aside from Big Bad Wolf, it doesn't seem like they've removed anything amazing. Finally, what's your favorite coaster at this park? Is it Pantheon, or are you a fan of one of their B&Ms? Or are you going off the board with a ride like Verbolten or Loch Ness Monster? Sound off in the comments below. Before you go, don't forget to drop a like. And if you're new here and love ranking coasters, please give me a sub. Also, check out my links below for my Discord server, and my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage, and my baseball channel if you're also a baseball fan. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.